Okay, so today we're going to be going over um, covenants. So you need to open the example loan project, open policy guidelines, open commercial banking Excel, open your loan analysis draft, and okay, that's all. That's all you're going to need for this one. So you should have completed the entire analysis except for the analysis review. So at this point, and the risks, and we'll do that next week. So at this point, you should only have covenants left. The only thing you should have to work on is this section right here. So the reason why we're going to open up loan policies or policy guidelines is because when we have different credit risks, we can mitigate those credit risks by adding in something called covenants. And covenants is going to be on page 12, section 5 of the policy guidelines. So you're going to need to decide what covenants you put on these guys. Now, if your company is over leveraged, you're going to want to put a leverage covenant. If your company has inadequate liquidity, you're going to want to put a liquidity covenant. If your company is insolvent, then you're going to want to put DSCR, debt service coverage ratio. If your company is taking out too many distributions, then you're going to want to put minimum tangible net worth. Naturally, we're all going to require financial statements. We're all going to require tax returns. We're all going to require brokerage statements for the guarantor if the guarantor has marketable securities. Now, my guarantor does not have marketable securities, so I'm not going to require brokerage statements, but I'm still going to write it down so I can show you how you would require something like that. Okay? If you have accounts receivable, you're going to require accounts receivable reporting. If you have inventory, you're going to require inventory listing. And I'm going to show you how to do that even though I don't have it. Personal financial statements for the guarantor, we're going to require that too. And we're going to require that for the guarantor. So I'm going to show you how we go about coming up with covenant policies, and I'm going to show you what financial documents are going to be required for everything. So we're just going to go down the line, right? Now, some of you guys have borrowers who discuss leverage. They might be over leveraged, and in the conversation they say something about leverage, like, "Hey, we don't want a covenant for that. We don't want to have to do this so that we can get our loan." And you're gonna have to talk about that inside this section and explain why you're not gonna do it. So where it says covenant one, okay, here we go. So I'm gonna delete this out. All right, I'm gonna delete that, and I'm gonna go up and find out what covenants my company is breaking. So when I go up and I go to key risks, go to the key risk section, it looks like my company has a collateral shortfall. They have AR concentrations, inadequate liquidity, excessive leverage, inadequate debt service coverage ratio, excessive distributions, consecutive quarters of sales decline, industry CAGR declined 4.5%. So there's nothing that we can do to mitigate risk 8, industry CAGR. I mean, what we could do for that is we could do a special covenant, and we can make that special covenant. And this is for you guys who have industry problems. What we can do is we can create a specialized covenant limiting additional debt. Right? We can do a limit on additional debt. Limit on additional debt. Frequency, we're going to make this an annual thing. So annually, we're going to make this due within 90 days. So that gives them 3 months to get this to us. Required, less than 0. Less than 0. Actual, not applicable, right? So if you guys have a company with industry, you cited an industry risk, then just write this down. This should be a decent one, because what this does is it limits our exposure with this customer. It limits our exposure. It basically says that just because they're having problems doesn't mean that we need to be worried, and the reason we don't need to be worried is because they can't take on any more debt, okay? Unless we give them the go-ahead. Okay, I know that it's not inside a loan policy, just bear with me. Okay, so now we'll go from top to bottom. So leverage covenants, maximum debt to tangible net worth, company policy. Okay, you guys can read it. Right, and then maximum additional debt. Oh, you know what? That's exactly what this is. Okay, so let me move that. Maximum additional debt. Okay, and we'll put this in financial performance. So instead, maximum additional debt. And this is for companies that have leverage problems, but also for companies that have the problems that I just mentioned a second ago. 90 days. We're going to do less than 0. Less than 0. And then we're going to do not applicable. Okay, not applicable. So my company, I'm going to put a maximum debt to tangible net worth covenant on these guys. And the reason why I'm doing that is because my company has inadequate excessive leverage, and they have leverage of 3.66. So what I'm going to say is I don't want them going beyond 3.66. So what I'm going to do is maximum debt to tangible net worth. Frequency, I'm going to make this testing quarterly, because I want to check for this every single quarter. And remember, you guys, when you're writing this up, just write it down however you feel. This is a feeling. If you feel like you want to check it every quarter, write it down like you want to check it every quarter. If you feel like you don't need to check it every quarter, write it down like you don't need to check it every quarter. So me personally, I want to check it every quarter. So your options, let me give y'all a better analysis. I'll give you your options here. On the PowerPoint, I'm gonna put a picture on page 4. That's gonna explain the options that you have as far as quarterly, annually, and then due within. Okay, so I'm gonna say required less than 3.66x. So that means that they're gonna have to go down lower. Actual 3.66x. So they're gonna have to bring this down over time. So by the next quarter, they're gonna have to pay this down below 3.66. And what that allows us to do is it gives us a chance to come back to the table in a quarter, in 3 months, and say, hey, you guys, you got until, this much time, and then we're going to change your covenant to be more strict. Okay? So there's this thing, variables for graph. When you have a debt to tangible net worth covenant, I want you to come over here and write down that debt to tangible net worth covenant. Now I don't have a minimal tangible net worth covenant, so I'm gonna remove that. I don't have a current ratio covenant. I don't have minimum liquidity covenant, not yet. Okay, so maximum debt to tangible net worth. We have both of these done. Liquidity covenants. Minimum current ratio. Minimum acid test ratio. Minimum cash requirement. Okay? So now we're going to come here. We're going to see, and when you have a minimum cash requirement, this means that the company has zero cash. So if they have no cash on their balance sheet, you need to put this here. If they have a decent amount of cash on their balance sheet, then put this here. And as a matter of fact, just for the sake of this project, if cash doesn't equate to at least 10% of the balance sheet, 10% of total assets, then you need to, if it doesn't consist of 10% of total short-term assets, then you need to cite this covenant. Okay? So anyways, mine isn't like that. But inadequate liquidity, the borrower's liquidity ratios fell 0.25 deviation from industry median. Okay, so let me check and see what they're at. So 0.59 compared to 1.5, and then 0.6 compared to 2. Okay, so I have to cite, I'm going to give them an acid test ratio because my company, remember, my company does not have inventory. But if you have inventory, then don't do a minimum acid test ratio, do a minimum current ratio, because it kind of defeats the purpose of doing both of them. Right here, it says it right here, requires the borrower to maintain, and you guys need to know the difference between what an acid test ratio is checking for and what a current ratio is checking for. Acid test ratio removes inventory from the calculation. We're going to test for this quarterly. I'm going to say due within 45 days. So that means I need to get their balance sheets within 45 days, and they have to confirm that their acid test ratio is above a certain point. And just because I just want to get their acid test ratio higher, I'm not going to make them have to meet the industry standard. I'm going to make them have to meet our in-house requirement. And what is our in-house requirement? I got to make up one. So for the sake of this, we're going to make our in-house requirement 1.10. Okay, so we're going to set it at 1.10. So we're going to say 1.10. And now what we can do is we can come over here to current ratio, and we can do 1.10. I know that this is an acid test and not a current ratio, but it works the same in this chart. Okay, it works all the same. And if it makes you itch and it stresses you out, just change it to acid test. Okay, and there we go. So we're going to say greater than 1.10, actual 0.59x. That's what they're actually at. And when we look at the financial statements, it says acid test ratio 0.59x right there. So I'm taking that directly from the balance sheet. 0.59x. Okay. So by the next quarter, I want this to be greater than 1.10. I know they're not going to get there, but they will eventually, and I don't want them to fall below that. Okay. So let's see what else my company broke our policy on. Collateral shortfall. The borrower has a collateral deficit of $530,000. So what this means is if they default, we're not going to be able to collect on around $530,000. A good way to get around that is to require them to have a decent tangible net worth, right? So right now their equity is at 540,000. So what we'll say is they must keep their net worth. Oh, it's at 586. They must keep their net worth above 586,000. So their net worth can't go down. And we'll test this annually. 90 days of greater than $586,000. And right now, that tangible net worth is $586,000. Okay. So what else did they break? Okay. Oh right, their collateral. We'll get to that too. Excessive leverage, inadequate debt service coverage ratio. So they did not exceed 1.10x. And their excessive distributions. When excluding distributions, debt service coverage ratio is lower than 1.10x. So we can get this down in one swoop. Debt service coverage ratio. Minimum debt service coverage ratio. And we'll test this quarterly. We'll say due within 45 days. We'll say greater than 1.10x. And right now, it is at right now the debt service coverage ratio is at 0.30x. 0.30x. Enter. So we'll get around to that. What else did they mess up? Consecutive quarters of sales decline. The borrower sales declined between first and second quarters in 2025. Okay, and then what else? Okay, and then AR. Okay. Okay, so if their sales declined, what can we do? We can create a special covenant. Now, a lot of you guys already have that special covenant written into your Excel. And that special covenant is no consecutive periods of losses. No 2 consecutive periods of losses. And this is going to be tested annually. Annually, 90 days. Yep, less than 0. No, greater than 0. Greater than 0, not actual. Okay, there we go. There we go. Okay, so we've gotten all of our financial and our special covenants. Now let's go into document monitoring. We already have audited financial statements in here. Now, I only want you to do audited financial statements if the company makes more than $20 million in revenue. If they make less than $20 million in revenue, then don't do that. Okay. Annually, 90 days. Good. Internally prepared financial statements. We already have it. We can save ourselves some time. I want everyone to keep these two in there. Now you can change the days that you want them. So you can change that to 45 days so that you can get it when you get everything else, or you can leave it at 30 days. It doesn't make a difference to me. Okay. All right. Now tax returns. We do want tax returns because what tax returns can tell us is whether or not they're lying to us about revenues that they're reporting. So if they're reporting different revenues to us compared with the IRS, then we have a problem. 90 days. Brokerage statements. So actually, for brokerage statements, we're going to have to create a whole other chart for document monitoring. Control C. And then Control V. Document monitoring, Guarantor, guarantor. Okay. So now we're going to come here. We're going to type personal financial statements. And then we're going to do brokerage statements. So we want both of these things annually within 90 days. Okay? And that's all that we're going to need from the guarantor. Just those two. And we're also going to need tax returns for the guarantor. Okay, so now where are we at? We're gonna need accounts receivable aging report. And we're gonna say do quarterly within 45 days. And then just for you guys who have inventory, you're gonna require an inventory listing. And it should be due within the same timing as your accounts receivable. Okay? And for those of you who have those, you're also going to require a borrowing base. Or let's come back down here. Financial covenants, borrowing base. Due quarterly, 45 days. Greater than, and let's see what our borrowing base needs to be in order to cover the loan. Oh, wait. What's my loan amount? Greater than $1 million. So a borrowing base greater than your loan amount, right? Our borrowing base is actually, the borrowing base is actually, for my borrower, our borrowing base is $469,000. So money sign 469M. Okay, and this is what we're going to be requiring from the borrower, all these statements. So now what I want you to do is I want you to come here, and I want you to move these charts over. I'm going to come in. And we're going to move this chart. I'll come here. We're going to move this chart right here. We're going to move this chart. Then we're going to come right here. And we're going to move this chart. Okay, so for covenant 1, we're only going to do one specific covenant. This is only meant, there's one covenant that you're going to need to define. So that covenant is your debt service coverage ratio. Now, what is it? This covenant is to monitor the borrower's ability to repay our loan, our notes, using cash from income statements. Okay, and then what are we doing? This covenant will be calculated as follows. Now you guys should have the exact same statement as me. We're going to do EBITDA less taxes, EBITDA minus taxes, EBITDA minus taxes divided by debt schedule. Divided by debt service, not debt schedule. Debt service. Now covenant 2, you can just remove this. And this is what your statement should say. Something along these lines. Okay? And this is how it should look. Now we can add one more statement saying the borrower and guarantor will be monitored via the following covenants. Now, another thing that y'all need to take into account is, I get that you probably don't know what all these things are. Take some time, read my little definitions that I have, and it'll make sense. Another thing, maximum additional debt, is come over here and look at these things. So these things over here, oh, they do have a tangible net worth. Tangible net worth requirement of 586K, 586, enter. Right. Oh, that's wrong. 586, 586, 123, enter. Oh, nope, that didn't work. Let's go back to 586. 586K. Alright. So that shouldn't be too hard for them to accomplish. Okay, so basically, what this is illustrating is that their debt to tangible net worth has to fall right here. It has to be within this area. It has to be to the right of this black line, and it has to be below this red line. Whereas the asset test ratio, it has to be above this red line, and it has to be to the right of this black line. And let me add something in so that you can see the black line. It has to be within this area, to the right of the black line and above the red line. These things illustrate what's going on with those the covenants, and that's why we put them inside of our analysis over here. Right? That's why. So I know I went very, very fast. If you have any questions, come to tutoring or send me an email, and I'll be happy to explain what's going on with this stuff. If you don't want to know anything more and you feel like this is enough so that you can complete your homework, then complete your homework and go ahead and get a grade for it. Alright, and this is the covenant section. This is how it should look when you're all done. It should look something similar to this. A lot of you guys, you're not going to need an asset test ratio, or you're not going to need a tangible net worth, or you're not going to need minimum debt service coverage ratio. You need to go and reference the policy, and you need to reference your risks. Your risk section and the policy guidelines are going to be how you determine whether or not you need these covenants. Everybody's documenting monitoring, everyone's document and monitoring should look exactly like mine. You should not have it looking any different. It should be the exact same. And your guarantor, if you have marketable securities, you must include brokerage statements. If you don't, do not include it. If you don't have marketable securities, do not include brokerage statements. But guarantor document monitoring should look exactly like mine. Make sure you make this chart if you don't already have it. Special covenants, come up with that on your own. financial covenants. It should be referencing the policies. What do the policies say? Okay. And if you have inventory listings, make sure you put that there. If you have a collateral shortfall, make sure that you do borrowing base. If you have a revolving line of credit, make sure you include borrowing base. Okay? So all in all, that's the homework. Good luck.